all green. Yes, we're live, and it's not 7 at night. It's 9:30 in the morning here on the West Coast, Cali time. Today I want to talk to you. I wanted to get on here early because I don't know what's happening later, but I wanted to talk about something that we started the discussion on last night, and right at the end, and then I left you hanging. A little bit of a cliffhanger last night on the live feed, so you guys got to make sure that you join the live feeds, and you'll get to see all this kind of excitement. Today I want to talk about the AMR500 Supercharger. And I was going back and forth about how to do a mount for this. And basically what I did was just walk out and open the hood of my 02 Silverado, which has a 5.3 on it. But more importantly, it has all of the factory accessories on it. So it has the mount for the power steering and the alternator. But if you look at the power steering and you can visualize this stuff for fabrication, you go, oh, look, that's easily going to go there. In fact, it looks like the offset where it positions the blower pulley in terms of where the rest of the pulleys are in line with that, and then where the belt would go. It looks like it's just going to go there and work. If anything, it's the distance to be made up of like a washer or something. So it's very easy. So it will bolt there. And the only thing that I have to do is run one other bracket to something else, just so, you want to kind of triangulate it. I'm not going to do two of them. All we need is one other one. And that would provide enough strength for the thing to be able to run up at speed so that then I could airflow test it. Because as I said, what I want to do is I want to spin the supercharger at different speeds and different boost levels and measure all of the things. So we want to measure the airflow potential of this thing using an air hat on the engine dyno. So what I'll do, I'm not going to run it on the truck. So guys understand, I'm not thinking about putting the supercharger on an LS. It's way too small for this. It's not going to do anything except restrict power. What I want to do is run it on the engine dyno. And now since I have all of these accessories, because I've used them for accessory tests, but what I would do is put all the accessories on, run the engine on, I have a few LS3s, so I'd run one on the engine dyno, and I would replace the alternator with the AMR supercharger with this Super Richie bracket setup for the AMR supercharger, and then run it with an air turbine that is used to measure the airflow of engines on the engine dyno. So it would tell us how much airflow is processing through that while we spin it. So we could run it at different speeds. We could run it at different combinations of blower speed and boost levels. And then we would run it with, as I talked about, making adapters to increase the flow, because the ones that they sell with the supercharger are going to be restrictive. They're too small. They're much smaller than the opening and the exit of the supercharger. So we'll make different ones to improve the flow. So we want to try that. But here's the thing. And I want you guys to let me know in the comments. If I ran this with the accessories, spinning the accessories, which I've done many times, because sometimes we have blower kits, other kinds of blower kits, Vortex or other positive displacement blowers, like when we ran the M90 on there, or when we ran the Cadillac blower. When we do that, sometimes you have to have all accessories, because they use that one belt to drive everything. So that's not uncommon. So I've run the accessories a lot. So the idea is run those accessories on the engine, run the motor, take the alternator off, put the AMR blower on it, and then run it again, and then do all the testing with the AMR blower. But here's where you guys come in. Have you ever messed with single overhead Honda stuff? Yeah, I wrote 3 books on Honda stuff, so I've run lots and lots of Honda stuff. I had several SI Civics, hatchbacks, lots of them. I've had DXs, all of them. Where was I? Oh, on the blower. So if we take the alternator off and then put the supercharger in its place, you guys let me know what kind of data would we not be able to get if I did that? So we would be able to get most of the data that I want. We could measure the airflow. We could measure the airflow with changes in the inlet and the outlet. We could measure different boost levels. We could measure temperature. But what would I not be able to get or not have an accurate reading on if we replace the alternator with the supercharger? Let me know in the comments. And why you guys are thinking about that. The answer is we wouldn't be able to get the power consumption, how much power it takes to drive the blower, because we would be driving the alternator, and then we would be driving the supercharger. And we don't know how much the alternator takes to drive all by itself because we haven't driven that individually. Because it's going to take something. It's not going to take a lot. There's no field being generated on it because we're not using the alternator while we're running it on the dyno. It's just spinning basically in the accessory drive. But it's going to require something because it has to spin it. It's it's weighted in there, even though it's not generating a field. It's going to require something. The blower is obviously going to require power consumption to drive to process this amount of air. And that's going to vary based on blower speed, the airflow, and the boost. All of those things are going to affect what the power consumption is for the supercharger, and that's going to increase with speed. But the problem is, I don't know how much to take away from the alternator. So if we ran it with nothing and then ran it with a blower, we could go, okay, the blower costs this amount of power because we could see what the difference is. But if we ran it with the alternator and then with the blower, we could see a difference there, but we wouldn't know how much of that was taken up by the alternator. So it would be an interesting thing. The alternator is going to skew that a little bit, which is why I'm actually leaning away from using the alternator, although this would be easy and make life really fast. And I could get all the airflow data that way. But I think I would have to build a dedicated bracket and run an electric water pump and no accessories and just run the blower by itself. Again, I could just weld something together and make that fairly easily. That would be an easy build. That would be an easy fabrication thing, just to run the blower by itself. And then it would kind of look cool too, because it's just a blower with cool aluminum radius entry tubes and stuff on it. So I'm trying to get my lighting right here. So that would be cool. But that's the problem with it. And I was very excited when I took the blower out. You can see in the thumbnail. I can show you that picture here. So this is the thumbnail for people that can't see it. So this is a little AMR supercharger, and here's the alternator. Here's the alternator mount. Well, this eye right here would go right there and position this blower pulley like almost perfectly in line with where the alternator is. And then if this was mounted here, then this just needs another bracket going somewhere else. It would actually be fairly simple. It looks enough like the alternator where most people might not even notice the difference. And you could run it like that. You have the inlet and the outlets that I was talking about. Those are the ones that are kind of restricted. And so we've made different ones. And thanks to Scott Hatch, big shout out to Scott. He has actually made an adapter to mount on the blower without the stub, without that tube on it, that will allow me to mount the at Westech, they have the air turbine. So the flange that he made will allow me to, because the air turbines are designed to mount like on top of a carburetor. So they have that size opening. And that's obviously quite a bit bigger than what we had. So he made a cool aluminum adapter plate that bolts to this, and then the round portion of it just goes to the air hat, can go right on that. So that's cool. So shout out to Scott. Thank you very much for that. That'll be cool to make life easier. I was hoping we could just go from the stack that I have and then just keep stepping up with bigger and bigger, reducers or expanders. But the problem is and Westech has a couple of different size air turbines, but the small one that they have, I think, only goes to 200 CFM. And my guess is that this is going to be above 200 CFM by the time we're done. So we'll see. But it's, we're excited about it. So that's how I spend my time, is going out and looking under the hood of my truck and seeing if cool stuff will bolt on. It almost made me want to take the belt off. The other thing that would have to be done, and this is not a big deal, is, and because this is a 4-rib or a 5-rib belt on there, so we'd have to run that. So the other thing I'd have to do is go get a belt that's that length and have it be a 4 rib or 5 rib, and only run some of the ribs on the rest of the accessories, and just use that to drive the pulley. I could also get a 6 rib pulley for that, but again, it's all just stuff. So if I ran a dedicated mount for the blower, then I could just run a small belt that would drive it. And then what I would do is just make something to make the tension adjustable, basically, on the blower, which is pretty easy. Something with different, a flat plate with different holes in it. You could just adjust it up and get the tension. You could make a little screw assembly to jack it up, and that's all just stuff to be able to do it. Because quite honestly, we're not racing it around. It's not going to the 24 hours Le Mans or whatever, or the 24 hours of Lemons even. It's just going on there, and it has to run and survive, and not pitch the belt. So it'll be cool. So I'm excited about that. Just get an alternator pulley. Yeah, I saw that. So we need a pole. Okay, so in my description before, where we were just like, where we have the accessories on the engine dyno, we have all the accessories on there, but we're just spinning them. There's no field on the alternator. There's no electronics hooked up to it. In fact, there's nothing hooked up to the power steering. Power steering is just looped. The water pump is obviously processing water through the engine. What's on the other side? Power steering, alternator, water pump. There's no AC over there. So my question is, all we would be doing is spinning the alternator. So my question to you guys is that alternator is just spinning the alternator? Would that be worth more than, would it cost more than 5 horsepower? Does just spinning the alternator consume more than 5 horsepower just spinning it? So let me know what you guys think. Have you messed with single overhead cam Honda stuff? Yes, lots. These series are good motors. Close ratio gearing is what really made them fun. Yeah, I had a 93 SI, which I loved. I think I also had a 95. And then I got a 99 SI B16, and then also a 95 Del Sol SI B16. Since we know what it takes to spin the M90, I don't know what it takes to spin the M90. I don't know how much power. I don't know what the power consumption is on the M90. And the AMR, you can't do math like that for the drive to figure out what it takes to drive it. And I don't like to extrapolate numbers. I like to test numbers and actually get it. That's why I want to do it. That's why I want to say, hey, look, definitively, it takes this amount. It doesn't take a math amount. It takes a tested amount. If you have an alternator that wasn't making power with no load on it, then it shouldn't add load. It does take something to spin the alternator. If you take the alternator and try to spin it with your fingers, there's resistance there because there's weight there. So it does take something. Seems like you need 2 of those blowers, and that you need more than that for an LS. Make a separate idler pulley. That's what I was thinking of. You could do an idler pulley and just put it in place there. I don't know what the terms involved with the dyno measuring the rate of acceleration of the engine speed. There is a load just spinning up a flywheel regardless of the friction. Yeah, if you change the weight of something on the engine, a flywheel, a drive plate, which I've done, the rotating assembly, the crankshaft, all that stuff, that will show as power. Big stereo guys make brackets for 2 alternators. Yeah, that would be good. I vote is yes, more than 5 horsepower, depends on torque. Inertia will keep it spinning, right? Yeah, but inertia wasn't free to begin with, though. Yeah, we could dyno it with the alternator. Yeah, that's really the plan. That's why I want to get rid of all that stuff. Also, I'd rather not bolt all of the accessories up to the engine and then have to figure out a really long belt. This way, I could just do it with one short belt. 5 horsepower go-kart will spin an alternator enough to charge a battery. Got to go put an oil pressure gauge on a boat. That's important to know. I think the M90 Gen 5 was something around 45 horsepower parasitic drag when tested on a Honda 4-cylinder at 1 bar. There's a graph showing his results. I'd like to see what those test results are, how he figured out what the parasitic loss was. That's not an easy thing to do. A lot of guys think you could just, well, we just spin it and let it free flow. That doesn't tell you anything. I guess is maximum horsepower from the alternator with stock accessories, stock stereo, all that would be 2 horsepower. So it would be 2 horsepower with an electric load on it. Yeah, 5 horsepower does seem like a lot. We need a blower dyno. Kenny Bell has one. They have a blower dyno in Sweden that they use a lot, and they have lots and lots of data from it, which is very, very cool. They actually use an LS motor to spin the blowers, and then they can regulate all of those things that we talked about. They can regulate the airflow in, the airflow out, the pressure, the blower speed, all of that stuff can be regulated. And then they also can run it, they can steady state it. So if we say, hey, we're running this blower at 15,000 RPM, you just don't wick it up to 15,000 RPM. You run it, you park it at 15,000 RPM and let it run there for 30 seconds or more so that you get stabilized temperatures and pressures and power consumption. Bicycles have power meters. I know I was trying to figure out on the truck, well, if I run this and spin it up and hook the mass air meter to it, then I can, I don't know, get some kind of data. And the reason that all this came about is because I was going to go down to West Tech this weekend and do a bunch of testing, but there isn't a dyno available, unfortunately, this weekend for me to be doing testing with. Not a Marxist. But you're converting something that's not there though, because we're not generating a field, so there's no voltage. So just spinning the alternator costs more than 5 horsepower. 58% are saying no. Seems like a lot. 5 horsepower would be a lot. It would be more than I think would be there even with full load on the alternator. That's my guess. Am I the only one to think it will lose power with this blower? You must have missed the earlier conversation. We're not putting this on an LS motor. This blower is a 100 to 150 horsepower supercharger. All I'm doing was figuring a way to mount it once we have it on the engine dyno, not to run it on the motor, just to airflow test it. Yeah, we're not gonna. That blower on an LS is not going to be good. You can run it with pantyhose. Yeah, I've seen that done before. V-belt stuff that works pretty well. You can that's actually you can get home that way. Those things were pretty tough. I don't know a lot of people that that wear pantyhose, but I'd be able to use a rope or belt or whatever, whatever you got to make work. Richard, are you planning on boosting the LV3 anytime soon? I don't have one. The guys at Brian Tooley Racing have one. I don't have one of those. But I would like to run boost on it. But the problem with those is getting fuel to them. So you'd have to, and with only 6 cylinders, you have less fuel available. So you'd have to have a setup with injector size and pump size and cam lobe to try to maximize the DI fuel supply, and then also have a port fuel injection as well. You want to adapt 3 of these end to end, like this, or stacked on top of each other? Stacked on top of each other is not a good idea. I mean, it's easy to package that way. That would be cool. First, we find out what it flows. Then we find something that we could apply it to. I think, I don't know. I'm thinking that the 2.2 liter Dodge, I think, might be an application for that. An NA one doesn't, it's low compression, doesn't make very much NA power, although it made more than I thought it did. If the results, the preliminary results that we got are any indication, it might be taxing that blower. That really just means that we need 2 of them, right? I really wish that this blower, I mean, this is typical of Roots blowers. It just goes one in the top and out the bottom, but it'd be cooler if it entered in the back and then went out one side or the other. Anyone locked out advance on a GM distributor for a boost application? We run stuff like that on carbureted stuff all the time. I got 105 amp G6 alternator for my 04 Mustang. I don't think you need 130. So do you not have a thumping stereo system or something? What about an alternator for electric supercharger that runs 48 volts? Yeah, you'd have to convert it, but I would think that the draw on the alternator would be quite a bit. Jason, you're here about 15 minutes late. That's okay. Yeah, unless you have a well, the vacuum advance is going to have a limit anyways. The one on my Sprint had a vacuum advance and boost retard, so the plunger went both ways. But we don't run vacuum advance on the engine dyno. We run a mechanical only, and we've run lock distributors before. We just turn the timing down by turning the distributor, but we're also not driving it around like that. Not sure if you made a video about this, but I'm curious to see how different cams act on Roots, screw blowers, and not changing the pulley size. Yeah, I've done lots of that. They act the same way. If the cam makes more power NA, it makes more power when you have the supercharger on there, either a Roots or a screw blower. I have Kenny Bell stuff up. I also have Roots blower stuff up where we change camshafts. So just no mechanical advance or vacuum, neither one on the engine dyno. We just have, it's just locked out. It just is what it is. So if the thing wants let's say on NA, it wants 35 degrees because it's a small block Chevy or a small block Ford, and we're running boost and we turn it down to 20. It's just 20 all the time. It's not ideal, but we can get away with that on the engine dyno. Not oh, you have a bracket racer. Oh yes, if you can get rid of some of the parasitic loss, you just put an electric water pump on it and get rid of all the other accessories, and then there's definitely power to be had there. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing what we're doing on the engine dyno. I wouldn't recommend that on a daily driver. That's not going to be a good option. Yeah, clutch fan takes power. The clutch fan and the water pump take a pretty good bit of power. The other things much less. The alternator, not very much at all. The water pump can be a pretty good bit. It's doing a lot of work. Yeah, we weren't able to. I mean, we have power steering on there, and we just have it looped, so it's not really building any pressure because it's not in. It's not going into the rack. So maybe a better test would be having it go into the rack. Without an alternator, I doubt electronic ignition gets enough to run properly. I don't know if Tenor. I don't know if that comment is on the test that we're doing because we're not using an alternator on the engine dyno anyways. It has all the electronics on the dyno, so we're not running alternators. But maybe your comment was about the guy running it at the drag strip. You don't need the alternator. The battery to make a pass down the quarter mile, if the battery's charged up, it would be enough. A lot of guys will run on race cars, will run 16-volt batteries. You heard an AC clutch being too hard on the throttle? Did you have the AC on while you're racing this thing around? So alternator on an open circuit. It's not an open circuit. There's nothing connected to the alternator. There's no electronics at all. It's just spinning. There's no wires even hooked up to it. The only thing it has on it is a belt. Just a belt. Just the facts. My Pops runs a 16 volt in his Race Nova for starting to. Yeah, if you have a high compression NA one, especially when you have a big motor, a big block or something, it's high compression, and it has a lock distributor, it could get problematic trying to start it. 16 volt systems are nice. The injectors and the fuel pumps and all those things kind of like that, especially fuel pumps. Especially the fuel pumps. I mean, having a 16 volt system is like having a Kenny Bell boost pump on there. Kenny Bell boost pump. And as we know, if you increase the supply voltage to the pump, you have more pump. It spins it faster. Those things actually work pretty well. I've run those a lot. We ran those on our Bonneville car. We ran one of them on our Bonneville car. We didn't run we had just had a 12 volt setup. In fact, we had the factory alternator, all that stuff on that car. Because it was it's a daily driver. It definitely could have been. In fact, I drove it around a lot the way that it was. I didn't like driving it with air dam and stuff on it. All that stuff is really low. Almost touching the ground. All of this swoopy arrow stuff. So how much power do you guys think then to spin the supercharger, like at maximum RPM? How much do you think what's the parasitic loss you guys think of spinning that little AMR500? Reloading, no, there's no load on the alternator. Dennis, you think 5 horsepower to spin the AMR supercharger? I'd be curious to see. Doing some math here. At least 5. Not to spin it, to run it all the way up and to have it make boost. So like, let's say maximum blower speed and at boost. How many people think that if we just free spin it with the inlet open and the outlet open and don't make any boost, how many people think that it will take that the parasitic loss will be lower doing that than if we actually have it make boost, if we restrict the outlet? Because that's how you make boost, restrict the outlet. How many people think it would take more power to do that than it would be to free spin it? Yeah, the little AMR500 little baby blower, how much power, like what's the most amount of parasitic loss that we could create with that thing? $6,500's got to be 15 to 20. That's kind of the range that I'm thinking. I think if we spin it up, it might be more than that. Dennis, I don't think it's going to make boost. It is going to make boost. We will make it make boost. We can create that. we can make it produce boost. That's pretty easy. Just put a discharge on it with smaller and smaller holes, and we're going to start small, and then we'll make them bigger, and then we create the boost that we want. It's too small. We're not running it on an LS. All we're doing is spinning it. We're just spinning it to see how much airflow it has. The LS is just used to drive the blower. It's not drawing in any of the air. Yeah, we just want to see how much it flows, so we know what we can apply it to. If it only flows 100 CFM, well, we got limited things that we can apply it to. If it flows 200, then we have other things. If it flows 300, then we have other things. I don't see it going beyond that, maybe, but we'll see. Julius, what's up? AMR probably not too much power. Seen them on 420cc, 15 horsepower engine, so it can't be huge. You still got to turn the gears and oil, even though there's no intake connected. Yeah. But here's the thing to think about. When is the blower doing the most amount of work? Is the blower doing the most amount of work when it's processing the most amount of air? And when is it processing the most amount of air? When it's open on both sides, right? It's processing less air when it's running under boost. We know the airflow goes down. So here's the spoiler alert. If we run this thing open at 15,000 RPM, forget about what the peak number is. We'll just say 15,000 RPM, whatever that number is. And we run it open, and we have big inlets and outlets in it, so the blower's flowing as much as it can flow. And then we're measuring the airflow. And then we put a restrictor on the discharge side and create boost. So it's still running 15,000 RPM, but now it's making 7 pounds. So we restrict it to it's making 7 pounds. What's going to happen to the flow rate? The flow rate's going to go down a lot. So the question is, you're flowing less air, you're creating boost. Does it take more parasitic drive to do that than it does to just free flow? These are all questions. These are all questions that I want to find answers to. How many CFM are you guessing? Nowhere near 400 or 500. Probably closer to 300. Doesn't the size of the pulley dictate the horsepower needed to spin it? No. The pulley size just dictates the pulley size works with the blower pulley size works with the crank pulley size, and then the engine speed to dictate what the speed of the blower is. But we can also vary that with engine speed. So if we run it at 3,000 RPM engine speed, it's going to be at one boost level, depending on what the drive ratio is between the crank pulley and the blower pulley. Then if we run it at 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 RPM of engine speed, we can get whatever blower speed we want out of this, because the drive ratio is going to be at least 2 to 1. It's probably going to be more than that between the crank pulley and this little blower pulley. The blower pulley is small on these things. Reloading, you're on your way to Facebook Marketplace, pick up a Gen 6 454 and a 4L80. Well, that's a good combination, right? I have a 3.2, and if I can make CFM boost for $300, I'm game. It's not going to work on a 3.2 liter. It's going to work on half of that. Yep, putting your hand over the vacuum cleaner revs up because the flow rate is less. It's only 1,000 cubic inches. What's a 3.2? 3.2 liters, not 1,000 cubic inches, right? I gained 2 miles per gallon by replacing my stuck mechanical fan. Yeah, mechanical fan's not great, especially if it's driven all the time. A clutched one is not bad, but electric fans are obviously the way to go. Because a lot of times when you're driving, A clutch fan you don't need if you get up to the temperature that you want, then it doesn't need to be spun. Electric fans can be the same way. If you're driving down the freeway, you might not have the fans on at all. You have enough airflow going through there, so the fans are not on, so there's no increased load in the alternator. But that trade-off is always a good one. Electric fans are a good idea for fuel mileage. So will the mass of the air going through the blower have an effect? That's the point we're talking about. Have you seen a 2-speed clutch for go-karts? I don't think I've seen centrifugal clutches for go-karts. Centurion, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what 3.2 and 1,000 cc's is. I don't know what those two things are. I know what 1,000 cc is. What is the 3.2? It's not a 3.2 liter engine, because a 3.2 liter engine is not 1,000 cc's. Have you heard of an SC14? Their price is similar to an AMR500 while having a displacement of 1,460 cc's. I've never looked one up, so I don't know what it is. And I don't doubt that they are. But again, we're not trying to do this to supercharge the LS. I'm not trying to find a bigger blower. We want to see specifically what that AMR500 does. One of those clutches might help smaller engines to spin it. The reason I got the upgrade Alternator 5 liters because I pulled dual fans out of a Contour. 65 amp wasn't going to power that. Ignition box, electric fuel pumps. I hope we see dyno results with these theoreticals. I'm intrigued. Yeah, we won't see dyno results. We'll see airflow results. I mean, it will come from the dyno, so I guess they are kind of dyno results, but we're not going to see power. We'll only see the power consumption of the blower, but it won't be running into a motor. It will just be flowing air, basically. Yeah, we're just trying to find out, okay, this blower flows this amount, spun all the way up. It flows this amount at 15,000, 10,000, 5,000 RPM, and it flows this amount at 10 pounds of boost and 7 pounds of boost and 5 pounds of boost at these various RPMs. There's lots of data we could generate. And then at this amount of boost, the air temperature is this amount. And then here's how much power is required to do these various things. It costs 10 horsepower to do this, and 20 and 30 and whatever the numbers are. So I'll have lots of data. So people that are looking at these are going, oh, look, here's all the information that we need to figure out what we want to put it on. Okay, 70. Now I understand. You have a 3.2 liter, but the blower is 500. So even two of them will not make boost. It depends on, it's not, you can't just go by displacement though. It depends on the flow rate of your 3.2 liter. You could have a 3.2 liter that only makes 150 horsepower. That's certainly possible. And on 150 horsepower, 3.2 liter, two of those would make boost and they would add power. If you have a 3.2 liter that already makes 320 horsepower, you're probably not going to do very much even with two of them. So it has to do with the power output more so than the displacement. Could you put a crank trigger on the pulley for the supercharger? So why do we want a crank trigger? Well, we are already running the motor on the engine dyno that has all the ignition systems on it. You still have an 80cc bike? I have a Trail 90. but that Trail 90 makes 5 horsepower. Right, but CFM volume, I don't the supercharger is an airflow device. So your motor, even at 3.2 liters, if it only makes 150 horsepower, it's only going to flow a certain amount of air. And actually, a 3.2 liter that makes 150 horsepower is only going to be making peak power at like 5,000 RPM or 5,500 RPM. So the airflow requirement is going to be based on the power output. Just to read the speed of the pulley, that's easy to calculate based on the drive ratio, though. Yeah, the blower. This blower would have to be on something that makes more power than the 5 horsepower Trail 90, but less than the LS. So we know at least those are the bookends. It's got to be less than this one and more than this one. So that's what I'm excited about. I talked to Brule about this and said, well, I know that you guys have a couple of flow meters. So what's the small one? He said, well, the inlet's 2.5 inches. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Not the inlet, but the outlet, let's say, the part that attaches to whatever you're trying to measure. I'm like, that'll be perfect because we'll step up from our 2 to 2.5. That's an easy reducer, stepper upper, and we put that on there, spin it, we're ready to go. He goes, yeah, but it only goes to 200 CFM. I'm like, I think it's going to be more than that. He said, yeah, if it's that size orifice, he said, I would think that it would be, but you know, didn't Honda just release a new Trail 90? They do have new Trail 90s out, yeah. But that's beyond my budget. And then I thought of holding the blower, idling the truck and just put the blower up there, push it against the belt. Well, if you bore your 5320 over, boost my horsepower. Yeah, anytime you make the motor bigger, it will make more power. 20 over is not going to change it dramatically, so you're not looking at very much power. Really want to know the CFM at different RPMs, if that should say RPMs, I think. We'll run it at, because we can park the engine at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, whatever we'll have to figure out what the drive ratio is between the pulleys to figure out what maximum RPM is. We know the motor will run to 7,000, which is probably going to be beyond where we want to be with the supercharger, but we'll know what the airflow is at the different engine speeds. And we actually could get that during a sweep. I mean, if the blower is on there and we run the motor from 3,000 to 7,000, let's say, we get a airflow track like going all the way up. It just shows the airflow curve. So is the AMR500 worth it? We don't know yet. We're talking about how we test it. So we're going to test it for airflow to see what you would put it on. Something like a YN671, don't they say there's something like a 50% loss? You're talking ProCharger, which is different, right? I don't know what you. Got something going on here. I don't know what you mean by a 50% loss. It doesn't take 50% of the power to drive the supercharger, if that's what you're talking about. But there is more power required to drive a 671, and they get. That sort of roots blower gets terribly inefficient as you go up in boosts on that sort of roots blower. Where are your 8.1 guys at? Did you have an 8.1 question? I'm going to run some more 8.1 tests. Might take 50% for my lawnmower to drive it. Yeah, I don't know if a lawnmower, although they have fairly powerful lawnmowers, they have lawnmowers that are way more powerful than my Trail 90 is. wanting to put one on my Ford 2.3 out of a 93 Fox body. Doesn't that 2.3 make more than 100 horsepower? My 8-point run was perfect after putting MSD wires on it. What was the matter with the stock wires that were on it? It's an 8. It makes 89 horsepower. That actually there might be something there. And see, that's a good example of why we would want to do this airflow test to find out, what will it support. There are chainsaws that make more power than the Trail 90. I think my Harbor Freight electric chainsaw makes more than my Trail 90. I have to say though, I have that Harbor Freight electric chainsaw, and I've used it for a lot of stuff. Have you heard of Redbeard's Garage? I haven't. Reloading, no. An 871, if it's making 600 or 700 horsepower, it doesn't require half of that to drive the blower. I'd like a little Trail 50 too. I always like those. I had a lot of fun on those. I have a 12 horsepower Tecumseh motor, a snowblower. Yep. Have you seen DDE? Who is DDE? I think the only people with a modern case to build modern, with a business case to build modern V12 for boost. So basically, in layman's term, the 4.8 was too healthy for the M90. Yeah, the M90 spun at the speed that we spun it at with the stock crank pulley and blower pulley. Was not producing enough airflow to support what the power output was on that motor. Because if you think about it, a stock M90, the one on the 3800, is rated at 240 horsepower. It probably makes, I think it makes closer to 300 horsepower, the way that we run it on an engine dyno with no accessories and stuff on it, and with an optimized tune and everything. But a stock 4.8 liter makes 330 horsepower, the way that we run it on the engine dyno. So it's not, that blower spun at that speed is not enough to support even a stock one, let alone the cammed one that we had on there. That's why it didn't make any boost. It might make boost down low on a stock one, but maybe not. Like I said, that's already way too much. It's designed to be put on a sub 200 horsepower motor and then bring it up to 260 or something. You can spin it a lot faster, as we did, and it will support a lot more airflow, but we didn't do that. Daily Driven Exotics is the name of it. Okay. Trail 50s are going for big money. I know. That's because they're cool. They're like OG. If you add boost, yes, you're going to have to change the airflow a lot. And if you have a mass air meter and the mass air meter is registering the change, it might add more fuel flow for that airflow. On a speed density system, it's not going to do that. Just bought a Sierra with 164,000 miles on it. Had a cylinder 7 misfire. Did coils, plugs, and wires. Use some junk aftermarket Duralast gold wires while waiting for the MSDs. So you saw a difference in spark plug wires? That seems odd. Yeah, Bobby, let me know what you're doing. That's cool. How's our poll doing? 54% are saying no. 5 horsepower seems like a lot. Beard's Garage is a YouTuber, made 15 pounds of boost on a Harbor Freight 440. Is that the one that did it in the Insight? That put the... I thought that was a Predator or something. Didn't they put a little motor like that in an Insight? Which is a perfect kind of car to get good fuel mileage out of if you're trying to do that. Oh, I just shut off the pole. I wasn't meaning to do that, but I guess it's time anyways. Oh, Robot Cantina, that's what it was. Okay. That's right. It's hard to keep all those. Robot Cantina, yeah. Red Beards, it's mini bike stuff. 15 pounds on a 440cc engine. Yeah, I said the boost thing is not... The boost thing is just a function of how fast you're spinning the blower versus what the restriction is. So the thing that's nice about this is the airflow will tell us, okay, it can support this amount of power. The boost that you make is just going to be a function of what did you start with to try to get it to that amount of power. The most amount of power that this thing could make is if you free spin the blower. So if you put it on a motor that doesn't make any boost and you're just spinning this blower, that's how much power it can support. In fact, if your motor does that and doesn't make any boost, you should just take the blower off, because then you're getting rid of the parasitic loss too. But that's basically the most amount of power that the blower will support is when you free spin it, because that's going to be the highest airflow number. But people don't put it on there for no boost. That's why I keep telling people, when you run these blowers on there and we add a camshaft and we add cylinder head or different intake manifold, and the boost goes down, that's a good thing. No, now you got to spin the boost back up. No, you're missing the point. The blower is now flowing a lot more air, which we want it to do. And ultimately, you should keep doing that. And instead of putting the blower on your 2-liter motor, now put it on a 3-liter motor, and then it's going to make even more power, and the boost is going to come down, which is good. Procharger is driven off the belt, right, and is mounted off to the side like an alternator. Yes, some of them are. Some of them are mounted, driven off of a chain. Some of them are directly attached to the crank on the front for like high horsepower drag race applications. But yeah, most of them are like a Procharger and a Vortec and a Paxton and a Torque Storm. All of those centrifugal blowers, for the most part, are mounted off to one side. Regarding your question about making 500 foot-pounds of torque on the 355, would oversized primaries larger than exhaust port act as an anti-reversion cone? Seems like that would help scavenging better. I don't know. I'd have to try. I've seen larger primary headers sometimes make more power down low, but way down low, not where you expect it. But I haven't seen a big change in peak torque from doing that. The thing that I think is the way to go on getting that thing to make 500. I'd like to try to revisit that. I mean, that engine's long gone. That was the Gladiator motor anyway. The Gladiator motor actually is still there, but I don't have any of the ported manifolds or anything anymore, I don't think. But I would like to try that again, because I think with more effort in cam timing and more compression, and then maybe some Super Richie custom intake manifolding, I think I could get there. Let's see. Stranger, yeah, it like I said, the blower is going to be effective on some given range of smaller engines that make a certain amount of power, and the airflow should tell us what that range would be. 7-day Centurion, thanks for being here. I guess 12 horsepower and max flow pushing 15 psi, M90 takes 35 horsepower to drive, and the little. So how do you know that an M90 takes 35 horsepower to drive? I think I actually have blower dyno results of an M90. I'd have to take a look and ask the guys at Kenny Bell if they've. I think they have run an M90 because I think I remember them doing stuff on the back in the day. This is the one where the guys tried to get me fired on the Celine, the modular Celine stuff, and then also on the Lightning. I don't think was the Lightning an M90 or was that an M112? Richard, did you instruct it NADC? What is NADC? So probably not. So centrifugal would be the different nomenclature that separates the different types. Yes, you have positive displacement blowers, which includes twin screws and roots blowers. Then you have centrifugal blowers. You also have axial flow blowers. You have scroll blower, like twin scroll blowers, which is what the Corrado used, which is also, I think, part of the centrifugal family. Latham made axial flow blowers, which is like almost like a jet engine kind of inside. What else? Turbochargers. Next time you do a header comparison, 180-degree headers. Yeah, we don't have any of that at West Tech. Nashville Automotive Diesel College. Nope. I'm not a diesel guy. I've owned one and done some chassis dyno stuff on them, but I'm not well versed in it nearly enough to be instructing somebody in diesel workmanship. G60 Corrado. Yeah, you get to like what you like. I just said that's a type of supercharger. One more minute. I'm excited about. I want to run this blower. And I'm also doing I'm excited about getting down there because I'm going to run that LH6 aluminum motor and do mods on that one. And if it all works out, I'll use that motor to drive it. Otherwise, I'll use the L33. They weren't diesel only. They offered a ton of phases on a high performance gasser. That's cool. That is cool stuff. No, done driving instruction, but not automotive. The Corrado was heavy. Those later motors were cool, but they would be even better if they were in an older, lightweight GTI or something, or a Scirocco, like a Callaway. Richard, what would happen if you drove the cold side of a turbo? How are you going to drive the cold side of a turbo? What are you going to use to drive the cold side? A couple of former NHRA guys instructed the horsepower class. You resemble one of them. Can't remember his name. Was it Rich Christensen? Electric motor. I don't know. If your question on creating vacuum on the exhaust side, if you take a look at, that's what they originally did with superchargers, but they did it on two-stroke motors on diesels. I think they were two-stroke diesels, if I remember right. Were the Detroit diesels, were they two-stroke? They used the 671 and 871 blowers on. I think that they were. And on that note, hashtag TurboCam. It's time to go. Don't know if I'll be back tonight. If I am, you guys will see. Hopefully, you guys will get notifications. But if not, I will see you guys tomorrow. Right now, I'm working on the best small block ever made, which is obviously the 305. I think that's a video for today. But I'll see you guys all, if not tonight, then tomorrow.